Good morning, YouTube. I thought it would be instructive as we continue with our self-defense series. We're going to talk about threats to preppers here and there, and I've done a series beginning the subject earlier, and this is a link to that playlist, and it's about the various threats you as a prepper may face during a RAL, which is without rule of law situation. Along that note, we should discuss another threat or potential threat to preppers, and that's going to be the potential of threats from the government. And let's go ahead and jump into this. Before I say anything, please don't run away and look at the headline and start posting all sorts of things. Please, I would ask you to listen and hear what I have to say. It may be instructive, it may be revealing. Hopefully, it will bring you a sense of at least peace in some areas. So, I watched an interesting video about this channel on another channel called Survival Podcast. And in this, the host disagreed somewhat with me on a few points. I appreciate that. I do, and I see the gentleman's point of view fully. And I think it is a reticent and well thought out one that he extends, which is about ERAW, Extended Rule of Law. Here's a link to his video if you'd like to have a look at it. I don't concur that my concern about RAW, that is without rule of law or total collapse, sometimes I use the euphemism lights out to mean some sort of a disaster. I don't concur, of course, with his analysis of my presentation of RAW, as it were. I use this euphemism, by the way, of lights out because I don't want to get caught up and fixated in a specific narrow scenario, because we really don't know exactly where, when, how, or even why things may occur, but we do have a sense that something will. Most of us. We smell smoke. We don't have to necessarily see fire to know that where there's smoke, there is fire. I'll call the place Survival Podcast. That way he'll have reference and you'll have reference to who we're speaking of, instead of using his first name, which I don't know that he gave in the video. So I apologize for being so formal. He mentioned a condition known as ERAW, or excessive rule of law, and I like that. That's a nice turn of a phrase. I think that's brilliant, in fact, and it's a very good concept that I would like to discuss, and it should be mentioned. Let's define something up front, please. RAL is a very broad term, and I'm not going to predict how RAL is going to happen, because it could be any number of events. Essentially, when a disaster or crisis, be it man-made or natural, financial or otherwise, the reaction of the people is often more devastating than the actual event. Look what people did over the beating of one man, Rodney King. Look how many people were murdered and beaten in response to the injustice done to just one man. Imagine this for something even more profound, like an economic collapse caused by reckless and unmonitored banking and financial practices. A food crisis caused by some pestilence or disease. A fuel shortage that may make fuel scarce or even unattainable or unavailable for a meaningful period of time. I realize also, give me 1 second to get a drink of coffee. I realize also where he may be a bit confused as to my intention and purpose of this channel, as well as my views on the end times. I take full responsibility for that one because of my background. As an instructor, I sometimes forget that I have so many new subs and that many of you have not had the opportunity to watch my earlier videos. That's quite a bit to ask. There's over 180 as of the making of this one. I apologize too, by the way, I'm having a bit of a cold as well as my other issues, so please bear with me. Thank you. I thank the gentleman at Survival Podcast as well for that. I appreciate when someone points out an oversight on my part. It's an error, essentially, in communication, and I take responsibility. Allow me to take the time, though, to elaborate, to clarify on this point, so to point out where he is right on ERAL and how I see it as someone who has been in the military for a minute, that is, since 1976. Been prepping since 1977, in earnest at that. Before I continue, I must point out that the opinions I express here are my own. I do not purport to represent or speak for the government or the military in any shape, means, or fashion. These are strictly my opinions, shared as is my right as a private citizen, and fully allowable under DOD 1344.10 and any other pertinent regulations. You won't hear me speaking of anything partisan, nor will I speak about anything operational or even remotely sensitive in nature. I love my fellow service members and will never place them in jeopardy by my words, by my conduct, or by my behavior. I have been a prepper since 1977, as I mentioned, although we didn't call ourselves that back then. We called ourselves survivalist until it became a sort of pejorative. Prepper is sort of becoming that now, although I am going to fight to keep it as clean as much as possible. And who knows, maybe one day we'll make it an honorific, like saying I'm a constitutionalist or I'm an intellectual. We can hope if we set higher goals for ourselves and standard for our conduct. During these years, though, I've always seen the issue and the concern of excessive rule of law or excessive reaction to events by government. And let's look into this now in a bit more detail. First of all, understand the government is a bureaucracy. That is not bad in and of itself. That is simply a statement of fact. The number one rule of a bureaucracy is to protect the bureaucracy. And the number two rule of a bureaucracy is to try to expand the use, the function, and the importance of your own bureaucracy. This is not a bad thing in and of itself. Indeed, with a growing population and economy, it sometimes is a necessary feature. When it starts to invent new roles for itself, this also is not bad in and of itself, because at times it is needed and it is reacting to valid situations, concerns, and needs. For instance, we did not need a nuclear regulatory commission when we first founded this country. We certainly need one today. We have all watched with much anger the excesses that occur as well when things get out of control. Things like Waco and Ruby Ridge, for example, to name but two. I watched the Katrina debacle and a host of other things. See my video series, Eyewitness to Disaster, and I talk about that. If you want a detailed breakdown of what happened in Katrina, and I don't pull any punches in that, I throw it right on the table. I've seen RAL and ERAL occur in other nations and countries throughout the world during my deployments, my combat tours, and other service done abroad. I am firmly convinced of the potential for ERAL, that is excessive rule of law, in any eventuality, and want to give my take on ERAL, specifically threats to preppers, when the government becomes a threat to preppers. And I don't just mean the U.S. government, I mean the government in general, just the notion. The potential is always there when you have power in the hands of someone for there to be mistakes and or abuse. Now, I am not anti-government. Let me state that up front. In fact, I am a firm believer we need to work with government during disaster, most of all. I also know the government does not view the population as some adversarial entity to be eliminated, nor does it have plans for genocide or extermination. I am sorry, but those conspiracy theories, which base themselves on this, though very disturbing if true, are also quite active and inaccurate in many cases. They are also not supported by the facts when taken in proper context. Arranging questionable data alongside a handful of proven facts and playing connect the dot is okay to theorize, but I would not make major decisions based on that, nor would I take definite action. Let me give you an example. Let's say I go outside and I see the doghouse, and there's a new roof being put on the doghouse, and the dog is laying on top of the cordless drill, and there's tools spread all over around the yard in front of him. I could assume, based on what I'm seeing, here's the dog obviously laying on top of the cordless drill and all these tools laid out, and a roof is being put on the dog's house, so it would look like the dog is putting a roof on his house. Therefore, I'd have to conclude he got into my truck and drove down to Home Depot and bought a bundle of shingles and all these nails. And then later I have to think a little bit further. Okay, then I look and think, wait a minute, that's actually my son's dog, and I think the implied task I gave to him when he got the dog was, you are responsible for the care of this animal. So he took it on himself to go down and put the roof on. The dog isn't putting the roof on. The dog is just laying there on top of the cordless drill. So that's but one metaphor I can borrow for the moment, and I will get into this a little bit more detail in future videos. I am in fact preparing a video on FEMA death camps at this very minute. It's not something you just throw out there, though. You have to be careful when you say things like this. You don't want to cause alarm. That's irresponsible. Nor do you want to put out bad information. That's also equally irresponsible. The government also has the military training on crowd control. That's right. We have had that mission, and it's not secret. We've had that mission quite seriously placed on us for some time. And I vividly recall doing riot control training back in 1976, and from that moment onward, when I came into the military. And it's still one of the annual training requirements that every unit seems to go through, at least that I've been in. And right alongside POSH, which is prevention of sexual harassment, equal opportunity, suicide prevention classes, and everything else. It's annual concurrent training. Our conduct during riot control, I want to tell you a little bit about that. Maybe give you a little bit of peace of mind. It's, first of all, very strictly governed and very strictly regulated with a strong emphasis on minimal use of force. That means if somebody throws a rock at you, you don't shoot them with a rifle or a shotgun. Use non-lethal means whenever possible. Furthermore, there's a strong emphasis not only on minimal force and non-lethal means, in which you've seen some of them, and some of them are quite disturbing. The radiation one that makes you feel like you're burning. It doesn't burn you, I guess. I hope not. And really, if they wanted to do that, they could just take a flamethrower out there and shoot you with it. Now, this is a huge and significant thing to pay attention to, though. The ultimate thing that we're trained to do is to disperse the crowd. Disperse the crowd. Make the crowd want to go home. Go away. Go home. No penalty, no foul. Go home. That's what we're trying to do. We fight very hard to do that, to make sure we disperse. We have avenues of egress. That's escape. We make sure that we don't push you into a corner where you have nowhere to go. They did that in Soylent Green. That's not Soylent Green. We want you to go home. So if we have to disperse you, we want to make sure you have ways to safely escape. All right? We don't have the facilities, quite frankly, to take all of you prisoner. And so this is a huge and significant thing to pay attention to. And this is written, and those of you that are in the military, raise your hand if I'm right. Do we not work to disperse the crowd? Now, do we detain people? Yes. We detain ringleaders and people that are trying to keep the crowd from dispersing. We want you to go home. That's the ultimate goal. Go away. Go back where you came from. Go home. More importantly, go back home so you can go to work tomorrow and pay your taxes. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's what's at the end of the day. That's the real concern the government has. It's not your best friend. It's not your lover. Doesn't want to marry you. It wants you to pay taxes. Sorry. Now, we don't have the personnel to do more than disperse you. That's it. Especially if it's a big crowd. We need the riot to be over and you to get back home working, maintaining status quo, keeping productivity and commerce alive and well and kicking. 360 million U.S. citizens can never be controlled by the 4 million or so military and law enforcement out there. And when you realize that not everyone in the military is a foot soldier, and if you just took everybody and put them out there on the front lines, it would last maybe a day. Because, see, you have to have food and water and command and control. You have to have supplies. You have to have fuel. You have to have all of these things flowing. The ratio is about 4 to 1. For every soldier out there carrying a rifle, there's 4 behind them supplying things. And that's the logistical tale that you hear people speak of that have military experience. I am very familiar with this. I am a senior NCO. I know exactly what I'm talking about here. Those of you that think you're going to put all 4 million out on the front, including sailors off of their ships and air crewmen from refueling airplanes, are mistaken. It's not going to happen. It'll last a day at best, and then you'll have even worse chaos. All right, let's continue. Call up the National Guard. Well, there's an idea. When the guard is called up, they don't take the people in the affected or afflicted area to respond there. They know these people are home taking care of their own family, and thus will call people from other unaffected areas. Pay attention to this. They can't do this in widespread roll, but they absolutely can do it during E-roll, and this is the crux of the matter. During E-roll or any other emergency, disaster, or event, the government has limited resources. So long as a tipping point is not reached where the resources are adequate, the government can keep things under control. Now, Survival Podcast has a very good take on this, namely that the government has very detailed plans to keep itself in power. And this is a place where we need to stop the video, and there will be a part 2 to the video, most likely tomorrow. It takes me a while to go through and edit these things, and in case you couldn't detect, my issues are kicking in. I've got to take my medicines, and I will be back. I promise you, I will not quit. See you tomorrow.